He swallowed the very poison they fed him for years, smiled, and detonated an explosion of power that shattered the ground for 50 meters. His enemy, who spent years engineering his death, knelt bleeding in the rubble. This man came back from the end of the world, and he's just getting started. The battlefield looked like a graveyard. Not the dramatic kind from stories, the real kind. Bodies everywhere. Silence, so heavy it pressed against your lungs. The invaders had come from somewhere beyond human understanding, and they had torn through the greatest warriors alive like tissue paper. Every 9-star fighter humanity had, its absolute best, ground to dust in what felt like hours. 2 figures remained standing. Zenin glorious. 8th Coven. Zenin's squad was completely gone. Every single one of them. He stood alone in the wreckage of what used to be a fighting unit, his divine blade humming at his side. Golden light wrapped around his body like a second skin. The mage 8th had poured everything she had into him, amplifying his strength to a level that shouldn't be physically possible. And for a few minutes, it actually worked. He found an opening. He landed a critical blow against their leader. For a brief, electric window of time, this man was untouchable. It was not enough. The invader leader absorbed the hit, kept moving, and Zenin's body began falling apart, bones grinding, mana burning out from the inside, every step a small act of will against collapse. He didn't care. He refused to care. If he died here, making sure the world survived, that was a trade he was ready to sign. 8th, watching him fracture in real time, made a different decision. She didn't fight. She didn't flee. She locked him inside a magical prison, a cage of light and intention. And while he screamed at her to release him, she reached for an ancient artifact that most people didn't even believe was real. A tool laced with divine tier power. The kind that doesn't bend the rules of the world, it rewrites them. Time. She was going to rewind time. The last thing Zenin felt was the warmth of that magic pulling everything apart. Then nothing. Then a ceiling he didn't recognize. He sat up too fast. His head spun. The room around him was unfamiliar. Fine furniture, expensive fabric on the walls, morning light cutting through curtained windows. His hands. He stared at them. Wrong size. Wrong weight. Wrong. A maid opened the door. She froze when she saw him upright. His first words? He asked her for a sword. Not where am I? Not what happened. He asked for a weapon so he could get back out there and finish the fight. The maid blinked at him like he'd just asked her to produce a dragon from her apron pocket. The second his eyes focused, really focused, the memories hit him. Not his own memories. Someone else's. The body he was wearing belonged to a boy named Noah. Noah Daskul, 4th son of the Daskul family. In the Daskul family, every warrior worth knowing in the previous era had heard that name. They weren't celebrated. They weren't loved. They were feared, and even that came mixed with disgust, because the Daskul family draws power from something closer to demon energy than holy light. 10 years. He had been sent back 10 years into the past. He was still processing that when the door opened again, and this time it wasn't the maid. Oscar walked in like he owned a room, which technically wasn't far off. He had a few lackeys at his back and that particular brand of smirk that said he'd already decided how this conversation was going to go. He looked at the shattered cup on the floor, the medicine Noah had just hurled against the wall, and started talking about wasted kindness. Zenin, Noah, let him finish. Then he said, flatly, that it was poison. Oscar's smirk didn't move. He confirmed it was poison by threatening to force it down Noah's throat himself. That was all the confirmation needed. What happened next took maybe 12 seconds. Oscar's first man hit the wall so hard the portrait above him tilted. The second swung, Noah ducked, came up inside the swing, and landed a hook that Mike Tyson in his prime would have nodded at. Both of them on the floor, shaking. The problem? Noah couldn't fully knock them out. This body, 2-star rank, barely functioning, years of deliberate poisoning in its history, wasn't the 9-star machine he used to pilot. But it was enough to make a point. Oscar, pride wounded and patience gone, pulled out his sword. His lackeys followed. Noah hadn't expected blades, and then something strange happened. Information began bleeding into his field of vision. Ranks, names, ability levels, laid out clearly for each person in the room. An appraisal skill, built into this body from the start, apparently, and a rare one at that. Most people never see it even once in their lives. These men were rookies, barely worth the trouble. Noah ducked the first swing without even thinking hard about it, caught the attacker's momentum, and sent him into the furniture. The second one came with more intent. Noah deflected the blade with his own and redirected the force so violently the man crashed into the far wall. Then his mana core exploded. Not metaphorically. The power inside this body, the mana core, source of all strength for a Da School warrior, went haywire. Oscar was actually smiling by this point. He'd been waiting for exactly this. The poison hadn't been meant to kill Noah outright. It had been feeding unstable mana energy directly into his core for years. The moment Noah pushed himself physically, the core couldn't handle it. Power with nowhere to go. A pressure cooker with no valve. Oscar activated his void shift. Dark tendrils wrapped his sword. He stepped forward with real killing intent for the first time. Noah stood there, core burning, body screaming at him to stop. He gambled. He had never tried this before. Not in this body. Not with this configuration of power. But somewhere beneath the mana core, the holy core was still there. His holy core. Xenon's core. Two systems that were never meant to share a body. He pushed the holy core to suppress the mana core's berserk state, forced one to pin down the other, and the combustion died. He came back to his feet. Oscar looked at him like he'd just watched someone survive a car crash and asked for directions. Their duel resumed. Oscar had real skill. The void shift let him vanish, mask his presence, attack from angles that shouldn't be readable. Noah deflected every single one. Through their exchanges, he was already reverse engineering the technique. The void shift burned mana every time it activated. Long fights were bad for Oscar. Short, decisive ones were bad for Noah, given his core's current state. Oscar made the mistake of vanishing again and roaring about how Noah would never see the attack coming. Noah moved before the attack even launched. Presence. You can mask your body. You can mask your sound. But you cannot mask the killing intent of someone who has decided they are about to strike. Xenon had spent a lifetime reading battlefields. One arrogant mana, user playing hide and seek wasn't going to fool him. The finishing cut was clean, precise, and final. Oscar hit the ground choking. The maids came running. Noah stood in the center of the room, looking genuinely more confused by the small dragon perched outside his window than by anything that had just happened. The dragon dropped a letter and left. Lord Victor, head of the Da School family, was calling a council meeting. Noah was invited to confirm his participation in the succession battle. He asked the maid, Selena, to explain. She laid it out simply. Every member of the family fights each other, and the winner steals the loser's mana core. Last one standing gets to lead the family. It's brutal, it's animal, and it explains exactly why the Da School family never accumulated much political goodwill in the world Xenon remembered. He smiled when she finished. The kind of smile that makes people near you very quietly inch toward the exit. The council chamber was cold and still when he arrived. Damon, eldest son, was there. Julia, eldest daughter. Cece, the second son. Eve, the second daughter. And Skull, the third son. The one with the poison hobby. Noah clocked all of them. Then Lord Victor walked in. The pressure arrived before the man did. A physical force, like gravity, increased by 20% in whatever direction he was walking. Every person in the room went still. Noah felt his legs lock. Not from fear exactly, from recognition. Even in his previous life, the name Victor Da School had carried weight. The strongest 9-star swordsman of the modern era. Standing in the same room as him was a different experience than reading about him. Victor looked at Noah, asked him directly what he intended to do. Noah told him he would win the succession battle. He would stand at the top of the family. And then he would defeat Victor himself. The room went silent in a very specific way. The kind of silence that happens when someone says something so bold that the air itself needs a second to process it. Victor released his full mana pressure onto his youngest son. Noah's body locked. His knees threatened to buckle. The power wasn't even aimed. It was just present, like standing too close to something very hot. He didn't step back. Victor asked why he wanted power. Noah's answer was quiet. He said he never wanted to have anything taken from him again. No speech, no performance, just the truth. Victor smiled, once briefly, and approved his participation. The training grounds the next morning. Noah cutting through practice dummies with mechanical efficiency. Physically improving, but slowly. The mana core and holy core situation was the real problem. He couldn't just spam holy techniques the way he used to. His body worked on completely different rules. He needed to figure out his new limits before anyone else figured them out for him. Julia showed up, watched him from a distance, then pulled out her sword and tried to cut his throat, because apparently in this family that counts as a friendly greeting. Their sparring session lasted long enough for Noah to confirm she was already at 7-star level, and for Julia to confirm that something about his mana core was deeply, interestingly wrong in a way she couldn't quite identify. She pushed him hard, harder than he could fully handle, and at one point he accidentally imbued his sword with both cores simultaneously to survive a hit. That little accident made her eyes narrow. She asked for his core before she left, warmly, like she was asking to borrow a pen. Kyle, the instructor Victor had assigned to Noah, arrived shortly after and pulled him out to a mission. A mana pool situation. Abnormal mana concentration in the forest. Monsters going haywire. Noah filed it under useful field test and followed. And when they found 3 unconscious children in the middle of the monster zone, he ordered them brought along rather than sent back. No time to waste. They went deeper. At the center, the Scorpia boss. Huge, fast, armored like a tank. Noah dove into the fight before Kyle could object, using his holy mana core hybrid to parry attacks that should have taken him apart at the 2-star level. He couldn't crack the exoskeleton alone, too durable. But he'd been watching. The venom of the smaller spiders they'd already killed, it softened armor on contact. He got on top of the creature and used those fangs like tools. The Scorpia dropped. Then he found the real cause of the mana pool, a hidden magical tool siphoning and concentrating mana from the area. He tracked it to a tree, cut it down, pried the ring out, and the problem resolved itself. But on the way back, more screaming. The children were surrounded. Every monster in the forest converging at once. The collars around the children's necks were the key, absorbing their mana to fuel the summoning. Someone was operating the tool remotely. Noah located the operator through the combined perception of both cores, handed Kyle the defensive assignment, and went hunting. The operator was hiding in an open field, which, given that Noah had just tracked him through a forest full of monsters using senses the man clearly didn't know Noah possessed, was not particularly clever. His name was Darius, 4- or 5-star fighter. His actual swordsmanship was mediocre. His mana control was exceptional. He could launch enchanted blades as remote projectiles in a widespread pattern. Against most fighters, that would be a nightmare to navigate. Against someone who had spent a lifetime in the worst possible battles imaginable, Darius's biggest problem was that he thought he was winning. He activated his Yuan-style second form, sending multiple controlled blades spiraling at Noah from different angles simultaneously. Noah moved through the pattern with an eerie calm, not desperate evasion, but precise reading. He closed the distance. Darius pivoted and countered, calling Noah's attack predictable. Then Noah used the dark light shift. He reappeared directly behind Darius. Not teleportation exactly, but a technique he had reverse-engineered mid-fight from Julia's methods, adapted through his own dual-core framework. Darius registered it too late. One clean cut. Game over. Except Darius, bleeding on the ground, pulled a vial from his coat and drank it before Noah could stop him. I need you to picture what happened next. This man turned into a monster. Not a small one. We're talking Tarzan physique, Vegeta's hairline, a full physical mutation into something that no longer qualified as human. Claws, speed, monster strength, and a very clear desire to bite Noah's head off. The young master did not have a good time. He dodged. He maneuvered. He gained distance when he could, absorbed punishment he couldn't avoid, and slowly came to terms with the fact that straight-up blocking wasn't going to work anymore. This thing was operating on a completely different physical tier. So he waited. The moment came. Noah produced the ring, the one he'd pulled from the mana pool tree. With the monster charging at full speed, he raised it. The ring absorbed the incoming strike and detonated a shock wave that sent Monster Darius spinning into the air. Then Noah followed, leaping upward, sword raised, and brought down what he called the bipolar blade. Holy and dark energy fused in a single strike. The monster stopped moving. Darius, reverting, tried to say something. Noah was already walking back toward the others. The monster waves surrounding Kyle's position cut off the moment Darius fell. All of them just stopped, turned around, left. Kyle stood in the silence with monsters retreating around him, looking like a man who had just survived something he couldn't fully explain. Noah removed the collars from the children. They stirred, confused, safe. Back at the estate, Eve was the next destination. The family's information broker, the one person who would know who was connected to the assassination attempt. Her quarters were through Cece, who guarded her like a wall with opinions. Noah asked Cece to move. Cece said no. Noah drew his sword. Cece drew his, and their sparring match began, which immediately told Noah that his brother was not using standard Doskull techniques. No single style, multiple patterns layered together. Stone Lance conjured a barrage of spears. Crushing Fong Rock Blade materialized a literal stone sword. The combat intelligence was very high. Cece was deliberately mixing attack patterns to prevent Noah from reading a single rhythm. Appraisal: 8-star swordsmanship, but his core, only level 5. Cece had been compensating for a weak core his entire life by accumulating and mastering combat knowledge from every source available. Noah processed all of this and activated his light shadow sword dance. Sesei's eyes went wide. He countered with his own technique, Black Thunder, an AI-style move that specialized in pure speed. The strike came in like a lightning bolt given personal grudges. Noah met it head-on. He survived, barely, one arm burning from the impact, but he survived. Eve's voice cut through everything before the second exchange could begin. She called them off with the particular authority of someone who has watched this family tear itself apart long enough to know exactly what tone of voice stops it cold. She invited Noah in. He explained what he was there for, information on the people behind the assassination attempt. Eve was already 3 steps ahead of him. She confirmed she knew why he was there. She also confirmed she would help for a price. The Infinite Library, a structure so vast and so dangerous that even elite explorers vanished inside it regularly. She wanted a specific book from somewhere around the 20th floor, deeper than anyone had publicly confirmed reaching. A text called UN. Noah's expression shifted. In his past life, he knew that book. It had been the foundation of a magical theory revolution that helped humanity survive longer against the invaders than they otherwise would have. It hadn't ultimately saved the world, but the lives it had preserved were real. Getting that book was personal. He shook Eve's hand and left within the hour. Arcanium, the city built around the Infinite Library, was exactly as crowded and chaotic as Noah expected. Finding a guide who knew the library's interior wasn't easy. Most people who went deep inside didn't come back with enough memory of the place to be useful. Ozer Harvest was the exception. Finding him in his closed shop, Noah made his case. Ozer declined immediately and with feeling. He was done with guide work. Too many adventures, too many casualties, too much weight on his conscience. But then Julia appeared in the doorway, casual as anything, mentioning she'd spotted Noah and followed him because she was curious what he was doing in this city. Ozer's entire attitude inverted on contact with her name. He would take the job on the condition that Julia came along. She agreed. On the condition that Noah came along. He agreed, which meant all 3 of them were going into the most dangerous library in the world based on a chain of mutual conditions that sounded like a really terrible business deal. In Ozer's back room, they found his wife, unconscious, cursed by a monster from inside the dungeon, slowly deteriorating. The only fix was killing the caster. Every adventurer he'd hired had died trying. He wasn't asking as a guide anymore. He was asking as a husband. Julia said she'd come. Noah said he'd help. Ozer packed an enormous bag and tried to look like a man who had his emotions under control. He did not look like a man who had his emotions under control. The entrance to the infinite library was a pair of enormous doors that Ozer pushed open with both arms like he was opening something sacred. Inside, a labyrinth, not a metaphorical one, an actual maze of impossible scale, shelves extending higher than the eye could follow, passages that turned in directions geometry didn't normally allow. Julia, for all her terrifying power, admitted immediately that she understood why guides were necessary. Noah's attention was pulled to something else. A statue of an invader, standing in the library's entrance hall like it belonged there, like someone had known they were coming years before they arrived. In his previous life, that statue hadn't existed, which meant this timeline was already different, which meant information about the invaders existed somewhere in this library, somewhere in its depths. Answers. His jaw tightened. They went deeper. The first floors went fast. Noah handled the ogres on the second floor with a swiftness that left Ozer flinching and Julia smiling that private smile she kept for things that interested her. By the 10th floor, Ozer brought them to a hidden bookshelf, one specific volume pulled in one specific way, and a secret door opened. A magic circle appeared beneath them, a shortcut Ozer had discovered alone. He stepped onto it with the practiced ease of someone who'd used it 100 times. They appeared in a chamber directly preceding the 20th floor. The moment they entered the plaza beyond, a summoning circle activated. Elder Trent, S rank, a tree monster the size of a building, ancient beyond reckoning, its bark like layered steel. Ozer's voice cracked explaining that last time he was here, there had only been a smaller giant guarding it. That it had evolved to this was not in anyone's plan. Julia looked at it for exactly 2 seconds before walking forward to engage it alone. She moved through the branch attacks like water around stones, fluid, reading every sweep before it arrived, adjusting trajectory mid-step. She got close and swung. The blade connected. Nothing happened. The trunk didn't yield. She landed backward, and Ozer screamed at her that they'd need a mage to burn through it. The Elder Trent wrapped her in branches. All of them. From every angle simultaneously, like the tree had decided that wrapping was faster than fighting. She was completely restrained in seconds. Then she activated the Shadow Flame Black Armor. Her entire body became fire, not fire adjacent. Actual blazing armor that burned through every branch, holding her like thread through flame. She moved inside the inferno like it was her natural environment, launched the first form of her Shadow Flame style, and began carving through the monster's trunk at speed. The cuts were clean. The damage was real. 2 halves. The Elder Trent fell. Before anyone could celebrate, it started regenerating. Because tree monsters, of course they regenerate. Julia expected this. Noah, reading her next move, grabbed Ozer by the arm and ran. Fast. Behind them, the third form of the Shadow Flame style detonated across the entire area. An explosive burial technique that didn't just burn the monster, it incinerated the regeneration pathway. Every cell of that thing reduced to ash. The silence that followed felt like the library itself was holding its breath. Julia walked back toward them and said they should keep moving. Both Noah and Ozer needed a moment. The 20th floor was a cathedral of knowledge. Shelves to every wall, books in languages Noah recognized, and some he didn't, the air thick with the kind of concentrated mana that made your skin hum. He found the book you in within 20 minutes. Pulled it from the shelf. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. But Eve's condition was only half of the deal. The other half was Ozer's wife. They needed to find a monster that had cast the curse. Ozer explained it didn't behave like normal dungeon monsters. It moved between areas rather than staying locked to a summoning plaza. Noah was already scanning the shelves when something else caught his eye. A second book. He didn't have time to read it fully, but what he saw in the first few pages was exactly the kind of information he'd been searching for. Then the armored monster appeared. Long arms, grotesquely proportioned, an aura of darkness around it that made the light in the room feel uncertain. Noah moved to engage. Julia stopped him with one word and stepped forward herself. She struggled. That was the thing about this fight. Julia, who had walked through the Elder Trent like it was warm-up, was being overpowered. The night monster's dark slash ground against her sword hard enough that even Noah and Ozer had to jump clear of the impact radius. She attacked in a zigzag, appeared behind it, got parried. A monster parried Julia Doskel. She used the flame vortex. It wasn't enough. Her attack landed clean and left no mark. Then the thing opened its mouth and released a green breath attack, cursing her arm, weakening it progressively with every second of contact. The attack was already traveling toward her head when Noah intercepted, crossing the space between them in a fraction of a second, pulling Julia clear. He asked if she could still fight. She said yes, and immediately told him about the arm. Any contact with a monster's bare skin transferred the curse, which meant the only person who could finish this fight without picking up that curse needed to attack from a specific angle. Noah asked Julia for one more use of her explosive burial technique. She didn't love the idea. She did it anyway. Both of them attacked simultaneously, light shadow sword dance and shadow flame sword dance connecting at the same point on the monster's body. The hit was massive. The monster didn't fall. Julia called it a true monster. She wasn't wrong. Noah parried the next attack. Julia used the AI-style second form. Noah combined it with his bipolar single-blade technique and drove forward. The monster caught his sword mid-swing and held it. Julia's vortex broke the grip. He pulled free, both of them breathing hard. Julia's core was nearly empty. The situation was about to get significantly worse. It got significantly worse. A second identical monster materialized from the darkness. And then the world went quiet. A voice spoke to him from somewhere that wasn't the library. Noah found himself standing in a space that existed between breaths. Light in the shape of a human figure waited for him there. Calm, ancient. It told him he was the first successor to the divine authority core in centuries, and that it did not intend to let him die uselessly before he could become what he was supposed to be. Then it gave him a name, one technique, one key. He came back to the library. A system notification appeared, Divine Authority Core, unlocking. Noah had half a second to process what that meant before he raised his sword, channeled everything through the holy dark fusion he'd been building toward since he woke up in this body, and announced to the night monster that its time was up. The light blades responded like they'd been waiting to be called. They extended from his blade, mobile, controllable, alive with power. He moved forward. The monster lunged. Their collision scattered light across the entire floor of the library. When the dust settled, the monster's arm was on the ground. It tried to flee. Noah pursued, closed the gap in 2 strides, and cut it in half. Clean. Final. He turned around. The second monster was already firing its green beam at him. Full charge, full power, point-blank range. He didn't move. He raised the sword and took it. Let the light blades absorb and redirect the energy. The beam splashed against him like it hit a wall. Julia couldn't speak for a full 3 seconds. Noah swung once. Giant light blades erupted forward and impaled the second monster entirely. It stopped moving. The curse on Julia's arm evaporated. Ozer's wife, somewhere outside the library, was breathing freely again. A new ability notification appeared in Noah's field of vision. A message from Zika's followed. Congratulations. Use it well. Prove it with your actions. Their boy pumped his fist. Returning to the estate with the Book of UN in hand, Noah walked toward Eve's quarters to complete their deal. Ka was with him. The door opened onto wreckage. Furniture overturned. Papers scattered. Cece leaning against a wall with the particular stillness of someone who had failed at something they considered unforgivable. Noah looked at him. Waited. Cece explained. Skull had taken Eve. While Cece was away on another assignment, Skull's people had moved in and grabbed her because Skull wanted information on Noah's abilities and Eve had refused to provide it willingly. The kidnapping was Skull's backup plan. Noah smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who has just realized they can solve 2 problems with 1 move. He said they just needed to take Eve back. Cal started calculating the logistics, how long to gather reinforcements, how many fighters they'd need. Cece shut that down. There was no time. Cece said he was coming. And when Kyle tried to argue, Noah dropped the Da School family motto into the conversation with the energy of someone producing the exact right tool at the exact right moment. Blades of the Da School family do not waver. Kyle stopped arguing. He swore to defend the estate in their absence. Noah and Cece rode out on horses at full speed. On the road, Noah asked Cece the question he'd been sitting on for a while. Why was a member of the Da School family acting as a bodyguard for Eve? A born Da School warrior protecting instead of fighting? Sesei's answer was honest and painful. His mana core had always been weaker than his siblings. Not by a small margin, by a margin that made the gap feel embarrassing. The only way he had kept pace was by hoarding information, finding every martial technique, every combat document, every piece of tactical knowledge he could access, and training with obsessive devotion until his skill compensated for what his core couldn't provide. Eve was his source. She had access to information nobody else could touch. Protecting her was protecting himself. Noah filed this away. It explained the unpredictable fighting style perfectly. They arrived at Skull's estate. Cece began talking about scouting the perimeter, identifying guard positions, finding a quieter entry point. Noah kicked the front gates off their hinges. Cece looked at him. Was that necessary? It was faster. The courtyard beyond was full of Skull's assassin squad. All professionals, all already in formation. Their masked leader immediately started talking about how walking through the front door was idiotic. Noah replied that he didn't have time for this and told him to get Skull out here. The first assassin who tried a flanking approach got cut down before he finished a step. The fight broke open. Noah engaged the leader directly while Cece handled the surrounding squad. Leaping high, bringing his shadow lightning crashing into the ground, the shock waves scattering bodies in every direction. His taunting was magnificent, but then the masked leader threw a scroll into the air. A massive magic circle formed on the ground. Noah tried to activate his skills. Nothing. All of it gone. The circle sealed mana cores. The leader advanced with a mana-coated sword and nothing but smug confidence. Noah was forced to dodge backward without skills to lean on. Raw swordsmanship only. The gap this created was real. He couldn't be as precise, couldn't respond as fast. Cece rejoined him, and the two brothers stood back to back in the middle of a courtyard that suddenly felt a lot more hostile. Cece told Noah to go ahead. He would handle the rest. Noah started to object, and Cece raised one finger. A stone slope erupted from the ground, giving Noah a running path clear of the crush. Stone spikes followed behind, decorating the path with the assassins who tried to give chase. Noah ran. Inside the detached palace, Skull was circling Eve like a man who expected intimidation to work eventually if he tried enough variations of it. She looked at him with the patience of someone waiting for a particularly slow bus. When he threatened her staff members, she called him trash without blinking. When he noted the noise outside and guessed Noah had arrived, she smiled and said that sounded about right. Skull called Noah a fool for charging through the front. Eve told him that a real Da School warrior wouldn't have done it any other way. He reached for his sword. Noah came through the window. Not the door. The window. With what felt like a deliberate decision about the most dramatic entry point available. He landed, looked around, announced he was there to get Eve, and Eve immediately told him he'd taken way too long. Running joke locked in. Skull leveled his blade. Noah raised his. He looked at his brother the way someone looks at a problem they've already solved. The charge came fast. The impact was massive. Both of them threw the wall simultaneously, tumbling into open air, exchanging strikes on the way down. They hit the ground, and the rubble exploded outward. Appraisal. Skull Da School. Black lightning aura. Multiple techniques, all 6-star and above. Noah asked why. Genuinely. Why use poison on children? Why hire assassins? Why not just fight in the succession battle directly? Skull had real power. Real skill. He could have competed legitimately. Skull's answer came through gritted teeth and swings, because Victor never acknowledged him. Not once. The entire family had looked through Skull like he wasn't there, and no amount of genuine achievement had changed that. So he'd built his own system, his own style, the Yuan style. Every technique in it was Skull's own creation, built from scratch because the family refused to teach him anything useful. And it still hadn't earned him a single glance from his father. Noah deflected a blade. Skull brought it crashing down hard enough to split the ground where Noah's head had been half a second earlier. The Yuan-style 7th form activated. Dark aura expanded outward like a living thing, twisting the air around Skull into something that felt genuinely corrupted. He announced the beginning of the end. Noah's response: Night Parade of Phantom Armies. You signal a move before you use it. That's a habit. The skeletons erupted from the ground anyway. Dozens of them. Noah tore through the first wave without slowing down. They were brittle, fast to destroy, but they kept respawning. Skull was using them as cover, positioning himself for a real attack while Noah dealt with the distraction. He felt it, the killing intent from behind. He spun, blocked. The skeleton's strength was not decorative. It hit like a real fighter. More of them. Closing in. Noah leaped. Twin heaven violent tear detonated across the battlefield. Beams of light carving through every skeleton simultaneously. Bones became dust. Landing, he fired twin heaven backward without looking as the next wave respawned, cooking them before they fully formed. He charged at Skull directly. Skull retreated, drove his sword into the ground, and a massive torrent of mana spread outward. A gigantic silver dragon erupted from the earth. Noah raised his sword and activated the eyes of holy darkness. The dragon's aggression dissolved. It lowered its head. Noah stepped onto it like he'd been doing this his whole life. Skull screamed at his own summon. The dragon ignored him completely. Noah had it now. He pointed it at its original owner. Skull, cornered, desperate, used the Yuan first form to attack through his own dragon rather than lose the confrontation. The shadow-piercing Fong tore through the creature, and it detonated in a flash of light. In the chaos, Noah slipped behind Skull and carved a long gash across his back. Skull stumbled forward, blood running. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white whistle. A gate opened. Julia, restrained by 2 of Skull's men. A hostage. Stop moving or she dies. Noah stopped. Skull grinned. Then the air detonated. A burst of red magic scattered both brothers backward, and standing between them and Julia was Damon. Eldest son, black armor, presence like a closed door. He declared that Skull had broken the family rules. He promised to kill him for it. Cold, precise, like announcing a weather forecast. Noah cut through it immediately. Damon wasn't here for family justice. He was here because he wanted Noah's mana core and an excuse to take it. Eve, from across the room, reminded Damon that interfering in a mana core battle also violated the rules. Damon clicked his tongue, backed down, folded his arms and watched. Noah turned back to Skull, invited him to continue. Skull's last reserves of pride ignited in one final explosion of dark aura. The Yuan 9th form, Dragon Slaying Burial. A shadow dragon born from his sword launched skyward and came crashing down like the world's heaviest falling object. Noah shielded himself. The impact tore the earth apart. When the light cleared, the shadow dragon stood behind Skull. The sky smelled like burnt ozone. Noah was breathing hard. Skull announced that a swordsman with a sealed mana core was already finished. Noah reached into his pocket. He produced a small, compressed pellet. The exact poison Skull had been feeding him. He'd kept a sample. Skull's face went through 3 different expressions in 1 second. Noah swallowed it. His body detonated in aura. The mana it released was unstable, overwhelming, exactly what the poison was designed to produce. Except his body had already been through this process. It had already developed the resistance. What would kill a normal person just gave him fuel. He called it a restoration potion, which was technically accurate if you had an extremely flexible definition of restoration. He said he had a reason he couldn't lose. No elaboration. Just the memory of Atha's sacrifice and the world that had burned in his first life. Then he activated the Shinwi-style 2nd form, light dark flash, and charged. The collision was seismic. Every exchange between their techniques detonated like a small bomb. The shockwaves were throwing debris against the walls of the estate. Damon and Eve watched from the edge of what was becoming a crater. When the dust finally settled, Skull was on one knee. Noah told him to surrender, told him to hand over the mana core, told him it was over. Skull went quiet. Then he nodded. He agreed. Noah lowered his guard by exactly the amount required. The stab came through his abdomen. He hit the ground. Eve shouted. Damon caught her arm before she could rush in. Skull, screaming now, something about never surrendering, about being looked down on, about the world owing him something, ripped the blade free and swung again. Noah moved faster. One horizontal cut, across Skull's chest. The counterattack landed clean and dropped him. Both of them on the ground, both bleeding. Noah staring at the sky, thinking that this family was genuinely insane. Skull had already been beaten. He'd agreed to surrender, and then chose this. Some people valued their pride higher than their life, and Noah genuinely didn't know whether that was admirable or just tragic. Eve broke away from Damon and reached Noah before anyone else did. She channeled mana through her hands. Not combat technique, but the Inca-style hazy lantern, a healing application that stopped the bleeding at the wound's edge. Slowly, carefully, his vision stabilized. He found the floor again. He asked about the technique she'd just used. She explained she didn't fight, but her mana core wasn't useless. Different application, different path. He thanked her. She redirected his attention to Skull's mana core, which by rights was now his. He walked to it, absorbed it. The power surge was immediate and total. 3 full ranks in a single instant. Years of growth compressed into seconds. Even he blinked at that. Cece arrived shortly after. He looked at the aftermath and said he hadn't expected Noah to be the one who ended Skull's chapter. Damon, before leaving, noted that he had never seen power operating outside the normal parameters of a mana core before. He said he was curious. He said he had more important matters elsewhere. His footsteps receded without looking back. The messenger arrived within the hour. Victor was calling for Noah. In Victor's chamber, the patriarch confirmed the rumors. Skull defeated, core absorbed. He asked for Noah's honest assessment of the battle. Noah said Skull surpassed him in swordsmanship and mana technique by a significant margin. Victor raised an eyebrow. Most of his family would have claimed it was easy because ego. Noah continued. His hunger to win simply refused to let his body stop functioning. Victor looked at him for a long moment. Then he said Skull had committed crimes within the family that warranted consequences, and that Noah had inadvertently served justice by winning. As reward, he was offered anything within Victor's power to provide. Noah asked for a mission, a specific destination. Victor nearly smiled at the absence of greed. He approved the request without further questions. The carriage rolled across open roads with Selena and Lydia handling logistics, while Noah thought about everything he needed to learn before the real fight arrived. Years from now, the invaders. The same force that had ended his first life. If the library held information about them that hadn't existed before his regression, there were things about this timeline that ran differently. Things that could change the outcome. Lydia pointed out the window. In the distance, rising from a landscape with the permanence of something built to last forever, Draconia. Dragon Nest City, where humans and dragons had built something together, where his next alliance would begin. The carriage slowed before the city gates. 2 Dragonite guards on horseback approached. They identified him as Lord Noah of the Doskull family and offered to escort him. Something felt wrong immediately. The aura around the 2 guards was too controlled, too deliberate, and somewhere in his peripheral awareness, movement in the hills. He accepted the escort calmly and kept his hand on his sword. The ambush came from behind. Ogres. Large, red-skinned, organized enough to know whose carriage they were stopping and angry enough about it to not care that the odds might be bad. The Dragonite guards were caught completely off guard. The ogre leader announced they were at war with Draconia and had no interest in watching the lizards build political alliances with human noble families. He offered Noah a way out. Behave, go home, survive the day. Noah pointed his blade at the ogre's face and made the exact same offer. The silence lasted about 2 seconds. Then the ogre slammed his foot into the ground, and the dust cloud swallowed visibility entirely. Noah stayed still. He didn't chase the sound. He waited for the intent. The hands burst through the smoke like twin battering rams aimed at his skull. He was already moving, sidestepped, felt the wind of the hit as it thundered past him, and watched the impact crater that formed where he'd been standing. The ogre threw a chunk of earth at him. Noah used the Shinanoa first form to shatter it in midair. The trajectory of the move left him open for a half second, and the ogre knew it. That grin spread across the red face. The fist pulled back for a punch that intended to break records. Noah blocked it with his sword. The force picked him up and deposited him into the mountain like a human cannonball. He walked out, still intact, visibly annoyed. He acknowledged the ogre's physical strength, gave credit where it was due, then moved with enough speed and precision to carve a clean cut across the ogre's arm before the giant could track the trajectory. One down. For remaining, now furious, he invited them to come together. Twin heaven tear detonated outward, for simultaneous beams of light skewering the attackers in different directions before they closed half the distance. All four came down in the crater behind the ogre leader. Lydia and Selena, who had been watching from the carriage window despite being explicitly told to hide, started clapping. Noah reminded them they were supposed to be hiding. They pointed out they had a professional obligation to observe important moments involving their lord. A figure dropped from above. He'd been watching from a dragon. The dragon itself was enormous, and the man who'd been riding it was armored in the style of the draconian military. He landed in front of Noah with the collected ease of someone who fights things significantly more dangerous than ogres on a regular basis. Adelbalt, captain of the Dragon Knights. Noah asked why he'd been sitting up there watching instead of helping. Adelbalt explained, without apparent embarrassment, that their king had no use for allies who couldn't handle their own problems. If Noah had needed rescuing from 5 ogres, the diplomatic relationship would have started with a very bad impression. Noah asked if he'd passed. Adelbalt confirmed it and offered to escort him to Lord Arcados. Dragon Nest City was something else entirely. Not just the architecture, which was impressive, but the texture of daily life inside it. Children from both races in the same streets. Dragons who moved between buildings without anyone scattering in terror. The integration was total and clearly old. This wasn't a new arrangement. This was a civilization. Selena couldn't stop staring. Even Noah found himself slowing his observations down to actually absorb it. Adelbalt led them through the city's center and into a large cave guarded by a greater dragon, one that radiated presence the way Victor did, like gravity with opinions. Beyond a hallway of glowing mana lamps, they reached an enormous gate carved with Draconia's crest. Adelbalt announced them. The gates opened. The pressure that flooded out was not like Victor's. Victor's pressure felt like standing too close to a furnace. This was different, older, deeper, something that operated at the level where time and power became hard to separate. Even the dragon guards in the chamber dropped to one knee. Selena and Lydia pressed against Noah's back without thinking about it. In the darkness of the chamber, 2 points of blue light. Eyes, ancient and alert. The light spread slowly, and the golden dragon Arcados revealed himself fully. His scales caught the lamplight like hammered gold. His size was not the most overwhelming thing about him. It was the age in those eyes, the weight of experience that made Victor feel recent. He looked at Noah and said, warmly, with what might have been satisfaction, that it seemed the divine core had found a worthy host after all. Noah met those ancient eyes without blinking. The conversation that was about to happen would decide the shape of what came next, not just for Noah, not just for the Doskull family, but for a war that hadn't started yet and a world that was running out of time to prepare for it. He didn't look away. The chamber of Arcados was completely still. The 2 Doskull maids had stopped breathing in the corner, not literally but close. The dragon guards remained kneeling. Adelbalt stood to one side with his arms folded, watching the meeting with the controlled expression of someone who had seen Arcados' presence destroy lesser men's composure entirely. Noah stood at the center of it and kept his feet under him. Arcados studied him the way very old things studied things they were deciding whether to take seriously. Then he began speaking, and his voice carried the resonance of something that had been alive long enough to stop being impressed by most things. He asked about the divine core. He asked what Noah understood about what he was carrying. Noah answered honestly. He knew the core had been split by people who feared its unified power. He knew Zekas had been killed for possessing it. He knew the two halves, mana and holy, should not coexist in one person. He knew that in his previous life, neither core alone had been enough to stop what was coming. Arcados confirmed each point with slight movements of that enormous head. Then he said something that reframed everything Noah thought he understood about the situation. The invaders were not an external threat. They were a consequence, something that this world had been generating the conditions for over centuries, a tension that had been building since before any living human could remember, and that the split of the divine core had accelerated. The war was not an invasion. It was a correction. Noah absorbed this in silence. Then he said that whether it was a correction or not, he wasn't going to let it kill everyone he cared about again. Arcados looked at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, not mockingly, with genuine weight, the kind of laugh that sounds like acknowledgement. He said the Dragon Nation would stand alongside Noah when the time came, not because they were obligated, not because the Da School name obligated them, but because for the first time in a very long time, something that carried the divine core had the right combination of power and stubbornness to actually use it. The alliance was sealed with no ceremony and no document, just the word of a creature old enough that its word was the only contract that mattered. Adalbalt's stoic expression cracked, very slightly, into something that might have been approval. The journey back to the estate gave Noah time to think. Selena and Lydia were unusually quiet for most of the ride, which meant they were processing things rather than filling silence. Eventually, Lydia asked, very carefully, whether he was all right after everything that had happened. He thought about Aeth, about the magical prison she'd locked him in while he screamed at her, about the cost of sending him back, and whether she'd survived it. He said he was fine. He had work to do. Back at the estate, Kyle met them at the gate, looking like a man who had defended a position and was mildly offended that his dramatic prepared speech wasn't going to be necessary. Noah updated him on the alliance with Draconia. Kyle spent approximately 3 seconds processing that before shifting to operational mode. If Draconia was involved, that changed the calculation on several things. Resources, information, access to territory the Da School family couldn't otherwise reach. Cece was already in the strategy room when Noah arrived. The Book of UN was on the table beside him, still sealed. Cece hadn't opened it, as a matter of principle. Eve was present too, seated in the corner and looking significantly more composed than anyone who had recently been kidnapped by their own brother had any right to look. She acknowledged the book, said their deal was complete, then added, unprompted, that she would continue providing information to Noah going forward. Not as a deal, as a choice. She had watched him walk through a window to come get her when every tactical option pointed toward a different approach. That had told her something she found worth investing in. Cece looked at the ceiling. He had feelings about this moment that he was clearly managing. Noah opened the Book of UN, and what was inside confirmed what he had suspected since he saw the invader statue in the library's entrance hall. This timeline had access to knowledge his previous life had never found. The magical theory inside wasn't just revolutionary. It pointed towards something specific, a weakness in the invader's fundamental structure that nobody in his first life had ever identified, because the information needed to find it hadn't existed in a form anyone could read. It existed now. It had been waiting in a library that most people never reached the 20th floor of. He closed the book. He looked around the room at the people in it. Kyle with his 7-star swordsmanship and military discipline, Cece with his encyclopedic tactical knowledge and stone-hard determination, Eve with her information network and quiet capability that nobody in this family had properly accounted for. This was different from his last life. His last life, he'd been a single warrior in a family full of warriors, fighting a war that was already lost. This time, he had started something, not a war, a foundation. Meanwhile, in a wing of the estate that most people knew better than to visit without invitation, Damon sat alone with his thoughts. He had watched Noah fight Skull. He had watched the technique that didn't fit any known style. He had felt the pressure of a power that shouldn't exist in a two-star core, something underneath the mana, running parallel to it, older and stranger and fundamentally different. He had claimed more important matters elsewhere as a reason to leave. He hadn't been lying, but he hadn't been finished thinking either. Damon Doskull had spent his life building toward a specific outcome: become the strongest, lead the family, carry the name forward. He had the power for it. He had the discipline for it. And he had never, not once in his life, felt uncertain about the path. Noah made him uncertain, not afraid, uncertain, which, for someone of Damon's construction, was somehow worse. He folded his hands. He waited. He thought about the next necessary move. Whatever Noah was becoming, it was something that would need to be understood before it could be properly evaluated. And Damon never moved without proper evaluation. Noah spent the following week in the training grounds at hours the rest of the estate considered unreasonable. Kyle found him there before sunrise 3 mornings in a row. The first morning, he offered advice. The second morning, he asked a question. The third morning, he just trained alongside him without speaking. The work was not dramatic. It was iterative. Days of attempting the same technique from slightly different angles, testing where the holy core and mana core overlapped, which combinations produced stable output, and which ones tried to tear him apart from the inside. 3 days in, he couldn't maintain the fusion for more than 4 seconds without the cores fighting each other. A week later, he held it for 30. By the end of the second week, the internal conflict had become a conversation. Not harmony, not yet, but dialogue. He was building something new. Not the holy swordsman Zenon had been. Not the mana warrior Noah Doskull was supposed to be. A third thing, something that hadn't existed before in this world's history. Julia appeared on the 14th morning and watched for a while without saying anything. Then she asked whether what she was seeing was the same thing she'd felt during their sparring match. He said it was more than that now. She nodded slowly. She said she looked forward to the day they fought again with his core fully matured. Not as a threat, as a genuine statement of anticipation. He said he looked forward to it too. He meant it. Victor called him one final time before the immediate chapter closed. Not to a council meeting. Just the two of them in the patriarch's personal study. A room that felt like it had been designed to make people feel small, and which failed completely to make Noah feel small, which Victor appeared to notice. He said that he had received word from Draconia, confirming the alliance. He said that the speed with which Noah had accomplished this was unexpected. He said that the Doskull family had many strengths, and that alliance building had historically not been among the most prominent of them. Noah replied that the invaders were coming, and that when they arrived, no single family would be sufficient. Victor went still. He asked how Noah knew about the invaders. That particular information was contained in documents that almost nobody in the family had ever been allowed to read. The invasion records were ancient history that Victor had spent decades verifying and that he had never shared with his children. Noah said he had found a statue in the Infinite Library's entrance hall, which was true as far as it went. Victor studied him, the way Damon had studied him, but with more experience behind the evaluation and more weight on the conclusion. Then he said, "Then you already understand what the succession battle is really for. Not the strongest member to lead the family. The strongest member to lead humanity when the time came." Noah met his father's eyes, said yes. He understood. Victor nodded once, said nothing else. The meeting was over. Walking back through the estate's corridors, Noah ran his thumb across the ring on his hand. The one he'd pulled from the mana pool tree, the one that had saved him against Monster Darius, the one that had caught a blow that should have ended everything. His mind drifted back, just briefly, to the battlefield at the end of the world. To Aeth, standing with that artifact in her hands, watching him burn himself out and making a decision he hadn't agreed to. To the look on her face in the last second before the light took him. Not desperation, not grief. Something colder and more determined than either of those things. She had believed in a different outcome. She had paid an enormous price to give him the chance to find it. He wasn't going to waste it. The dual core shifted inside him, The two incompatible forces that had somehow agreed to share a body. And for just a moment, the sensation was less like conflict and more like pressure building toward something. The way water feels before it becomes a wave. He kept walking. There was a succession battle to win, a family to reshape, a library full of answers he hadn't finished reading, a dragon king who had committed an ancient nation to a war that hadn't started yet, a brother who was calculating his value with cold intelligence, a sister who was going to come for his core the moment she thought the time was right, and somewhere in the future, an invasion that had ended the world once and was going to try again. Noah Daskul, former 9-star holy swordsman, current 2-star mana core prodigy with a divine power neither world had seen before, walked through the estate of the most feared family in the land and started building toward the day none of that would be enough of an obstacle to matter. He had made a promise, even if no one else could hear it. This time, the outcome would be different. If this helped you, consider liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment below. It means more than you know.